The 1980s was a time of blockbuster movie hits like The Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, St. Elmo's Fire, and 16 Candles. The actors in these films were branded as the Brat Pack. However, the actors most associated with the Brat Pack movies often had a tumultuous relationship with that term. Now, actor and director Andrew McCarthy takes a deeper dive into that phase of his life and its impact on Hollywood. Let's take a look at a clip from his new documentary, BRATS.
My understanding, you were not interested in talking about the Brat Pack for years and years.
I'm asked to do retrospectives all the time, whether it's Repo Man, or The Outsiders, or Young Guns, or Breakfast Club. I turn everything down.
How come you're talking to me?
Because you called me. Because you asked.
Love that clip. Joining us now, Andrew McCarthy himself. Thank you so much for joining us.
Nice to be here.
So you really kind of take on this kind of investigative reporter role, connecting the dots, reaching out to the old friends. What made you decide to do this?
Well, several years ago, I wrote a book about my experience of that time in the 80s because it was such a life-changing experience, and it was a seminal time for me. It changed who I became. And when I finished the book, I kind of realized my feelings about it had changed, moved probably 180 degrees. I hated the term at first. I didn't like it. And then I'd grown to sort of embrace it as probably the biggest professional gift of my life. And so I thought I would go seek out the other members of the gang, because there were only a few people in this club, you know, and we're the only ones that, well, I don't know how exclusive, but we were the only ones who had it happen, it happened to. So I just thought I'd get their take on what it was, you know, and it was really surprising and interesting, liberating, really.
What was the issue with the term in the beginning, and what prompted you to really evolve over time to ultimately embrace it?
Well, I think it was a combination of different cultural events that were happening, because it was in the early, mid-'80s when youth movies just took over in a way they never had been before. You know, so it's a seismic cultural shift. It's hard for us to realize now because all movies are sort of geared toward a young adolescent mentality. But back then it wasn't the case, and this was the beginning of that. And then, you know, this article came along that branded us as the Brat Pack, and so there was suddenly a handle you could grab onto, and it just it caught fire, the term, because it's such a witty, clever term. And so, you know, and it was sort of disparaging and negative when who wants to be called a brat, who wants to be lumped in a pack and all that. And so at first we, you know, recoiled from it. But the public was, I think, a lot smarter than us and realized right away that, like, we represented them, you know, for that generation up there. And we were like the cool kids. And so they always embraced it. And it took me just a lot longer than them to realize that, you know, this was an amazing thing.
It was such really an iconic era of films, and I think that people have this, at least those who are outside of the Hollywood circles, this idea, maybe romanticized, that, oh, those characters are really friends in real life and they hang out and spend time together during the movies and after, but kind of hip us to the game of how that really might not be true.
Well, I mean, I think we just sort of all worked together, and then when that was done, we all went home. But we did represent that kind of, you know, because also movies before that were about sort of largely romantic love. It was about you and me get together, and then we break up, and then we get back together. And that's the movie. But those movies put friendship at the center, and that was new at that time. You know, Friends hadn't existed yet. St. Elmo's Fire is just a precursor to Friends. It's just about a group of kids who just graduated college, and they all hang out together. And, you know, would Friends have happened without the Brat Pack? Yeah, probably, but we drove a truck through that to open it up for people, and we forget that now, you know?
You've done a book now, you've done a movie on it.
I know, it's just relentless, isn't it?
Is it healing? Is it cathartic? Is it nostalgic? How would you describe the process? I
mean, I would say it's more liberating than anything else. You know, it was a period I ran from and sort of stuffed under a rock, and sort of finally look under the rock and experience it from my own perspective was one thing. Okay, let's figure out what I feel about it. But then to go connect with you or whoever else, those people that shared it with me, then you have a sense of community about it. And then once we have a sense of community, we're not so isolated, we're not so alone. I mean, that's what's so powerful about movies. That's why those kids loved us, because they saw us, you know, and they saw themselves in us. So suddenly they're not alone and they're not isolated anymore, and they can identify with Molly Ringwald's feelings of isolation or whatever, you know. And so, especially in that time of late adolescence or something, it's a real seismic time in your life. You're blossoming, you're coming of age, and people often feel very separate and different, and we allowed them to sort of feel seen.
Andrew McCarthy, you said it best. Thank you so much for coming by. Really appreciate it. Want to let our viewers know BRATS starts streaming on Hulu Thursday, June 13th.